To grow your spiritual awareness, to develop your psychic connection to other dimensions, requires diligent discipline. And one of the key tools I use for that is to lean into mapping the movements of the asteroid Vesta. So if you feel like you are losing your connection with spirit and you're not quite sure which way to go, and you're listening to all the gurus and they're saying this, that and the other, perhaps just kind of take a step back, get the calendar out and start thinking about actually mapping to a planet. So a lot of people will map obviously to the moon, or we all map to the sun. We decide this is when we get up, when we go to sleep. Many people say, right, I'm going to set an intention at the new moon, see how it's developing at full moon, etc. But this is for a bigger endeavour. This is not just personal practice. This is for a representation of our devotion as a vocation. So, why Vesta? Well, Vesta is an asteroid that was discovered in around about, I think it was March 29th, 1807. And she was named after a set of very famous priestesses from Roman times who were called the Vestal Virgins. Now let's see the first correlation. Well, there's two really, isn't there? So they weren't mapping the asteroid because the asteroid hadn't been discovered, and I am not copying them because I am not a virgin, right? So that's the first thing. But in an astrological chart, Vesta represents sacred service, devotion, how the most important thing that you will honour and treasure in your life turns up in your life. Now, ironically for me, sacred service is the thing that turns up as most sacred to me, but that won't be the same for everybody. But obviously, as she moves through the signs, and she'll usually stay between 3 and 6 months in a sign. She does vary because she's got a strange shaped orbit. What happens is the energy that you feel off her is different. So for example, at the time of my recording, she is in Capricorn. So what she's actually throwing light on is the things that you can do to put structure and rigour and foundations into your sacred service. So already that's a very different energy to, okay, let's just connect with spirit. Okay, she's saying, all right, connect, but I want to see organisational structures. I want to see discipline. If you think Capricorn, those of you that follow me for medical astrology maybe think also Saturn. Saturn's about the boring stuff. It's about sitting down and doing your revision for exams. It's about turning your papers in on time when you want to go to a party. It's all of that stuff. It's about turning up with discipline and with structure. I'll talk about how I'm relating to that in my life in a moment, but let's kind of put the framework in place first. So she'll move out of Capricorn in a few days, actually, around about the 11th of January, I think, without checking my notes. And she'll move, obviously, to the next sign, which is Aquarius. Now, where Capricorn's all about structure, it's an earth sign, so it's about structure and getting foundations and being grounded. Aquarius goes, woo, let's go in the air. We're going to this beautiful, light, dreamy energy, the dreamy energy of the skies. But Aquarius is all about humanitarian endeavours. It's about the collective. It's about what it's kind of the opposite of the patriarchy, you know. It's about equality and how everybody improves. Thought structures. So we've gone from paperwork structures to thought structures. And when we talk about humanitarian endeavours of the collective, we might say peace process. We might say sustainability. We might say ecological endeavours. The things that don't just suit one person, they apply to the masses, right? So within my practice, what I'm doing is saying, as she goes through each sign, my position as a priestess, and that's another conversation that we can have later, as what on earth do I mean by a priestess? What's my job? Because at the moment, priestess is a made up job. It is. It existed a really long time ago. 2,000 years ago, priestesses were powerful women who had status and prestige, and they served the goddess, but they also served the collective. Now, today, when we're talking about priestesses, this is not like a generic statement across the board, but in a lot of cases, what you'll see is there's two other versions of a priestess starting to emerge. And I will state that I believe that they all have merit, right? I'm not dissing any of them, to use a modern vernacular. But for many women, being a priestess means being able to channel the archetype of the goddess. So I, for example, channel Artemis, who is a warrior. I channel Aphrodite, who is beauty, and what else is she? I love, that was the word I was going to say. So, and sensuality, so channeling that expression. Or Diana, channeling the intellectual expression, but also strategic in business. You know, that is a great archetype for women in business. So I am not saying that version of priestess is not valid. It's wholly valid. But it misses a component for me, because I have a real strong remembering of being something different 2,000 years ago. Some part of me did something different to that, and my soul misses it, you know? So then there's another expression of the priestess, and that is what I would say would be classed in old times as the mystic, that she is channeling the goddess. So she's not just bringing through the energy and like embodying it, she's actually bringing information down, downloading. And that is what I do. Not through the goddess, I do it from the plants, I do it from the bees. So I definitely also know that that is a component, but it still doesn't fill that space of, yeah, what about your service for the community? You're not doing it. So by mapping Vesta through the zodiac, what I'm able to say is, right, I can take my direction from her almost as a spiritual advisor, that she says, spiritual director is a better term. Hildegard of Bingen and Teresa of Avila both had spiritual directors. They didn't tell them what to do. They told them, they kind of opened their awareness to other pathways that they could take. So operating with Vesta as a spiritual director, and she's saying, okay, but we've gone through, you've gone through the like thinking about the house and home when we were in Cancer, so now we're on to something else, right? So thinking about it from a really well-rounded perspective. And what that does is it makes you really think about, I'm not just going through the processes that everybody else is making me do. And when I say making, I do mean making. So I'm talking about this as a spiritual practice, not a religious practice. So, for example, it might be a really good salve for a teacher who feels like everything is about the Ofsted report. Everything is about ticking the boxes. Everything, I can't do what, but by actually kind of projecting and saying, well, Vesta, what would you do? She'd say, well, I'm thinking at the moment the energy of that Vesta report is to make sure that that it's ticked properly. But there are other elements that you could bring through. And, social workers, even just anybody could use this and really think about how am I expressing my sacred component from an individual perspective. So over the next few months, I'll really be talking about this a lot because, like I say, as a spiritual practice, it's going to be my North Star for this year, because I really want to see how much this develops me. And for those of you who perhaps don't know me and haven't come across me before, I'm a clinical aromatherapist. That's what I do. But I also am able to hear the plants and hear the bees. And hearing the bees came about because in 2018 I started researching a book about Melissa essential oil, and I wanted to know what is it in there that makes it so good for pain, because it's great for pain. And when my books chart the earliest mentions in history to the latest clinical evidence from the lab, so there's a trajectory. And when I was doing this bit, I found an old herbal that said the Melissa was the priestess of the ancient Greek goddess Demeter. And I don't know if you've ever had it, but there was just that second I was like, what? That felt so profound to me, and I just had to know, who was this woman? What was she for? What was her function? I could not leave it, and it became this enormous kind of obsession for me. And I mean, it took me on a direction of doing a degree in classical studies and learning to become a beekeeper, because Melissa means bee, and all of this opening up. But where that came from was by picking one solitary motif. Motif is a great spiritual word of saying, right, what can I learn about that motif? And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So now I am so tuned in to bees, I can hear them. They speak to me, and if I say to them, I want to learn something new, the bees come to me and they tell me what to do. And the bees told me about Vesta. So now I will learn everything there is to know about Vesta. And Vesta, of course, is a planet, a goddess, a fire, a priestess, and all of these different layers. And when you find a motif that can really help you, so we're going to be talking astrologically, astronomically, physically, historically, what you'll find is these layers, you learn to read between the layers. And as you learn to read between the layers, a whole new awareness opens up. And so for one person, they might see a bee. I see thousands of years of history, thousands of years of women's lineage, so much more. And your awareness becomes huge. And one of the key ingredients for the success of that is to not go spiritual awareness, I'm just going to open myself up to the universe. No. You find a single point of focus, and you look at that single point of focus from the most exquisite detail till you wring the finest drop of oil out of it. And when that drop drips, you go, right, I want to inspect that drip now. And you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and ask any aromatherapist how much is in a drop of oil. Hundreds of chemical constituents, vibrational essence. We go smaller and smaller, and as we go smaller and smaller, our awareness gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is spiritual development. So, if you're not subscribed, subscribe. This is the first video in a series, so I will make a playlist and you will obviously get notifications when I make new videos. One of the most important things that I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks, when we've left Capricorn, because in Capricorn what I am doing is looking at an area of aromatherapy that I see as a massive weakness in the world of AI. And I can see that that is going to become a problem to us. So I'm writing all sorts of frameworks and arguments and articles, and that has to be done by the end of Capricorn. So deadlines, a planet gives you deadlines, right? And then we move into Aquarius, where my job will be completely different and also very refreshing to me. After all this cerebral thinking about detail, my job will be to meditate and be as an astral witness to the peace talks, to the environmental talks. In the same way that the Vestal Virgins had to stand at the meetings, they weren't allowed to speak. They weren't allowed to contribute. They weren't allowed to make decisions. They just were there as witnesses. Well, I think there's too many men in the room at these peace things. And if they're not going to lock the door, well, I don't need to be in the door. And I'm sure if that appeals to you, you don't need to be in the door. What you need is a mentor who can help you know how to access the axis mundi, actually, for a shamanic term, show you the axis mundi to be able to access that kind of realm. But also you need a spiritual director who says, well, these are the pitfalls, these are the opportunities, and these are the threats. And obviously working at a state level, Vesta is the state of Rome. At the state level, then the hierarchy and the stakes are high, and therefore the energy is turbulent and sometimes malefic. And so we also need to, before we get all the way up there, know how to protect our energetic field. We know how to move in and out of energetic fields, but a weak energetic field can't do that. So how do we cleanse it? How do we purify ourselves to make sure we're not taking miasma into someone else's realm? How do we protect our energetic field? And all of those have relevance in every state. So even if you're not thinking, I want to do the psychic work, well, protect yourself when you're going to school. Cleansing your aura to make sure that you don't catch all of the bugs, for example. It's all good. It's all good in the world. So if this kind of resonates with your spirit and you feels like something that you would like to do, please put in the comments. Please click subscribe, but also find a way to contact me, because I really feel, this is a Melissa talking now, that the community is the strength. I think it was Walt Whitman that said, I am large and I contain multitudes. We are large. We all contain multitudes. Imagine what we could do if we just all directed energy together for peace, or we all focused our intention on really thinking about architecture or the home, but at any given time purely mapping something astronomically, not astrologically, astronomically, to say, okay, time to move to the next bit. So this is my spiritual practice. I hope that over the coming weeks you'll find it interesting to see how that plays out. Nobody's ever done it before, as far as I know, so this is new, and I really think it has strength. So the Vesta, the asteroid Vesta. Why don't you join me?